the New World Order, and the conspiracy to cover it up. The shadow government's agenda in keeping us asleep. The injustice, catastrophe, and the global chaos are all indications that we are living in a period of time known as the end of days. Are you looking for answers? They are out there, and together we will find them as we navigate through End Times Now with Bree.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of End Times Now with Bree. I'm Bree. Here, the topic of conversation that I have between me, myself, this microphone, and your ears is the end times. Boy, are we in it. We are so in it. You guys know the routine, hopefully, that I'm looking for people to talk to. I see the light. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm really hoping, I'm not going to say anything though, because every time I say something, it goes the opposite direction. So, nevertheless, you know, I've got some things that are coming through the pipeline, and I think it'll be interesting to get some different perspectives on different things that have happened to different people, because I know that there's got to be others out there that can relate, and I think that that's important. So, if you're one of those people, please get in contact with me. I'll make sure and put all the links in the description per usual, but usually you can find me on End Times Now with Bree at protonmail.com. Also, I went ahead and did an Instagram. I had a couple of people ask me to do that. And so I thought I would get with the program and go ahead and do that. So I do have Instagram now, and it's under End Times Now with Bree. Also, if you want to help me out, please download the Spreaker app and listen to these episodes there. They give me a boost when you guys do that. But of course, you can go ahead and rate me on Spotify. Ultimately, I just want to make sure that the message gets out to the ears that will hear. And, of course, please share this podcast. If you are jumping in right now, I highly recommend that you go back and you listen from the beginning, because there's a lot of things that are given in consecutive manner that are important and will help you to follow certain episodes. So please go ahead and share it for me. Especially this series. This series, to me, this is one of the most important, if not the most important, that I did, or that I'm doing, I should say. So, sweet. I'm pumped. I've got my coffee. I got my 3 hours of sleep. And so I'm a little slap happy, but let's roll these beautiful beans in the footage. So, okay, y'all, this is part 2 of the end time signs, Rapture, and Antichrist. I'm really sorry I had to cut the last one off where I did, but it was time, dude. I had to edit out 9 different segments because I just could not speak. I could not speak properly. I was totally misreading words and just, yeah. But this series is going to have at least one more episode on top of this one. Maybe even 2. I don't know. I feel confident, and it's going to be good. But if you're just landing on this episode, at least go back 17 more episodes and just start there. But there's a lot of things that I'm going to talk about that you might miss if you haven't received all the deets from the other ones. Okay, so what's going on out there in the land of the nutters? Let's take a look, shall we? So Tucker Carlson throws out the fact that Representative Dan Crenshaw voted to give Joe Biden the power to shut down news sites that dare to challenge him, and then tells reporter Liam Cosgrove, Dan Crenshaw did this, told Cosgrove that, quote, he knows that the intelligence agencies don't use our data to manipulate us. No. And they're not controlling the flow of information. And then Cosgrove, he asked Cosgrove, the reporter, he says, do you have any evidence that shows otherwise? And then when Cosgrove started to answer, it's just like, he was just like a scared teenager who like got caught in a lie. And I know this because I have one of those. Anyway, he immediately deflects back to the press, asking if anyone else has some serious questions. Ha ha ha. And then when Cosgrove came back to like remind him of the laptop from hell, Crenshaw could not get into his ride fast enough. And he even had like a little hissy fit for a moment there. I felt like if he could have stomped his feet and then like crossed his arms and did like a big old then he would have done that. But you know, y'all do realize that like they see us, and they know exactly what they know everything about us. Okay. I just want you guys to know that. Don't let it scare you, but Uncle Sam knows everything about you. They don't know anything about me though, because God doesn't keep me in one place long enough. Like, I feel like I should just sell all my furniture and like live in a pod or something. Anyway, in other news, the COVID vaccine is 100% safe and effective. Yeah, I love me some Tucker. He had a doctor on to talk about this very thing, and it's nuts. Basically, what he said was that the deaths from people the ages 25 to 44, I think he said 44, have doubled in one quarter. And it was the third quarter of 2021, and he said that is unprecedented. Kind of like how they said that COVID was unprecedented. Anyway, he says that the data given by the CEO of One America, which is, they're a big dog in the kennel, they're a life insurance company. He said that they were observing a 40% rise in life insurance claims. He said that based on the rise of 10% year to year in a certain sector of society, this is a 100 to 200 year event. Y'all, the wealthiest, the healthiest, and the highest educated young people are dying at record rates. I don't fall in that category anymore because I'm pushing 50. I usually tell people I'm like 70 though, because then I look really good. Anyway, the other thing is that the CDC released some data saying that there is a 143,233% surge in fatal cancers of those who got the shot. Just remember, though, the vaccine is 143,233% safe and effective. Hashtag New World Order. The Tyson factory in Perry, Illinois, joined the Tent Partnership for Refugees, which was founded by the Chobani yogurt person, Hamdi Ukaya. Uyukaya? I don't know. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, the plan is to hire some of the 181,000 migrants, just over, that have come through New York City. Y'all, this is what they're doing. They are using Facebook to hire them, which I get it. I mean, you can totally tell what a person is like from social media. You can see if they have integrity, like you can see everything because there is absolutely no filters and everything is like straight across the board, 100% on the up and up, right? Nothing fake. So these people these wonderful American citizens who gave up their jobs at Tyson also ended up giving up their health benefits to these non-citizens because Tyson forced them to give it all up and has chosen to bless the non-citizens with the jobs, the paychecks, and the health care that were once these wonderful American citizens who had been working there forever. Oh, yeah, and attorneys. They are giving them attorneys to help them gain their citizenship, of course, because that's right around the corner in 2034. Y'all, I think Jesus is coming back first. That's all I got to say about that. Anyway, as a result, they took out the jobs of 1,200 Americans, which Tyson in Perry, Illinois, is a very small town. And that's crushing. That's crushing to a town like that. But 1,200 Americans lost their livelihood so that they could replace them with people who will work for slave wages. Okay? So let's think about that for a second. How much good are they really doing? I'll give you a hint. None. Anyway, on that note, who wants to call the next chicken farm that goes up in smoke? Like, it's not funny, I know, but seriously, would it be ironic or coincidental? I think not. Anyway, we should probably eat more beef. And also, I think that stock in Purdue might just go up a little bit. Okay, but then there was this. So just take a listen. Okay, this lady just walks up. They're walking up to a Ring doorbell, and she just walked up and said, "Been in the driveway for 2 days." Okay.
You can see their stuff there. Maybe they're home.
She said, "You can see their stuff there. Maybe they're home." So they're peering in the windows of this person's house, and okay.
Hey, bro. So we got to talk about something. I don't know who, but someone's been over here, right, for over a day. They obviously stayed overnight because their car has been in the driveway overnight. And according to the HOA policy, states that any visitor visiting, whether family, friends, lawyers, therapists, you name it, has to check in with the HOA. And who's the HOA? Well, that's me. Okay.
Because I always have my therapist and my lawyer spend the night. Oh, why not my doctor too? I mean, or my vet or my dog groomer.
Yeah, this is a serious problem that has to get resolved
There's new sheriff.
ASAP, because if not, it's going to lead to more fines. The fine right now for having an additional guest in your house that stayed overnight is $150. That's not $1.50, that's $150. My wife's been watching the whole time, right?
Photo evidence.
We need to get this resolved ASAP. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'll bring the fine by, and then we're going to talk about it, okay? I'll be back in just a little bit, and then we'll discuss things. Got it?
Okay. Okay. So this lady, okay, this has to be a joke, you guys. The lady, his wife, they turn around to go the opposite direction to go off of this poor man's porch. And she pats him on the back and she goes, "Good job." Okay. Can we just talk about the extensive need for power that a person is not allowed to have anybody spend the night without checking in with the HOA? You've got to be kidding, right? Like, no, sir. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say about that. That's insane. Like legit. That's legit insane. But when did that, my thing is, because I like refuse to live in another neighborhood with an HOA. I think that they're for some people. They're not for me. I personally don't feel like we were meant to be living in boxes right on top of each other, which is interesting because that's exactly what they're trying to do to all of us, is stick us in these little tiny places and whatnot. But let alone so close to other people. Like, we're supposed to be living as a tribe, right? We're supposed to be living as a tribe together, and instead we're all closed off in these boxes, and we're all right on top of each other with our lot lines and what have you. Yeah, I'd rather be in my mom's basement forever. Anyway, I think that's hilarious, and I hope that you do too. Although I feel really, really bad for whoever the homeowner is. Yeah, that was like these two people. And the funny thing about it is that I'm going to post it. I'm going to post it on my Facebook. So, or maybe I'll put it on my Instagram. But anyway, there's the fisheye, right? It's the fisheye lens because it's a Ring camera. And so the guy's like looking, and he just looks hilarious. Like his nose is all like it's funny. You guys have to see it. Anyway, so okay. The other thing going on today is that Caitlyn Jenner is still a man. All right. So just remember that the more chaos in the world, the more horrible it gets out there, you guys. Jesus has your back if you let him. And he likes to feed us too, by the way. And so in my eyes, I'm not excited about it at all. When I'm searching for things, I see some things that I just wish I didn't see, right? But it gives me the availability, or the opportunity, I should say, to do two things. Number one is to pray for that person. And it also gives me a shot to like check my heart, because there have been some times where I've had to be like, nope, that's not the right reaction. Whatever that person is doing or whatever is unaware that what we have in this world is driven by unseen forces and demonic activity, and it's driven by Satan, right? Principalities and rulers of darkness. And so, that being said, I am able to face whatever comes on my porch and whatever's at my front door, like those two people, knowing what to expect. I know what to expect. And I also feel 100% okay. Because I know Jesus has told me. He told me this is what the next play is. And, you got a first down, and like it's the game is we're in overtime right now. We're in overtime, and we're about to make a touchdown. So I know that, and I'm 100% comfortable with that, and I hope that you are too. I hope that these episodes give you the hope that you need to understand that you're not alone in all of this, and that you don't need to be afraid of anything. God did not give us a spirit of fear. That's all Satan's work. And remember that if you have accepted Christ, then you have the Holy Spirit, and he says that he that is within you is stronger than he that is within the world. Okay? Okay. So let's do this. I got some good stuff here, you guys. All right. So we've been talking about the eclipses and the significance of these Jewish holidays. We've been talking about when these eclipses would be coming and what they mean. And the fact that there's one coming on the 25th of this month, that's a lunar eclipse. And then literally 2 weeks later, there is an eclipse. It's a total solar eclipse on April 8th. And it has lots of significant characteristics that make it worth watching. But another thing is that we need to remember that it's for the nations. Okay, so a solar eclipse is for the nations. The lunar eclipse is for the covenant people. And then any other like signs in the skies and the heavens are for the, we watch Israel. It's for the children of Israel. So, but it's also important to note, though, that so this one upcoming in April 8th will be part of 3 that were very, very significant. The first one was August 21st of 2017. The second one was October 14th of 2023. And then the fourth one is coming this year on April 8th. So that is to just give you a little recap. But here's the thing. The 3 of them create the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, or the alphabet. And that is an aleph. It's an A. And the A in Hebrew stands for Master, Lord, Father. In Greek, it's Alpha. And there's a picture, and this is important, so hold on to this, because we're going to get into this one in the next one. The picture is a bowl. So remember I told you a while back that each letter has a picture attached, each one has a number attached, and each one has a meaning, and even the spelling of the letters can break down in their own meanings, so on and so forth. And then, so there's this last eclipse that's coming in April, along with the first one. Those two create the last letter in the Hebrew language, which is a tav, sometimes also called a tau. And it's interesting because it's a cross. So the other one's a bowl, and this one's a cross. The other one means, so Aleph means Master, Lord, Father. And in Greek, it's Alpha, so first. And then the last one is Tav. It's a cross. The meaning is truth, sign, life or death. And that same letter in the Greek is Omega, so last. So we have the first and the last eclipses creating the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And it converges over to the Greek by being Alpha and Omega. And we know who said that, right? I am the Alpha and the Omega. Yes, you are. Seriously, you guys, if you want to be amazed, go dig into the Hebrew language. I put a link a couple days ago on HebrewForChristians.com. That's what I use to teach my kids in homeschooling, and it's awesome. But anyway, it all points right to Christ. It's very interesting. Wait till you get to the letter Nun, N-U-N. It's pretty awesome. Anyways, so the convergence of the first and the last eclipses create a big X, and it's right over this area called Little Egypt. The first eclipse occurred 33 days before the fulfillment of the Revelation 12 sign that happened in that following September. And that was on the 233rd day of the year. And it was 133 days prior to the last day of the year. It arrived from Oregon, which is the 33rd state, and it ended in Charleston, South Carolina, which is located on the 33rd parallel. Do you guys see a pattern yet? Just wondering. Charleston is the location of the first Supreme Council of the 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemasons, called the Mother Lodge of the World. And now, if you heard me say this before, cool, I'm going to say it again. Unless your people that you know are high rankers in this club, you guys, I don't think that y'all have anything to worry about, okay? Because I really don't think that they have any idea what's going on behind closed doors. When you think about, the old saying that goes, a wolf in sheep's clothing, there's a reason for that. It's because it works, right? So I don't think that they know what's going on unless they're up there in that, 30, 31, 32 degree mark, 33. They're probably, those guys I feel like they've probably caught on by now. And they're probably worshiping Lucifer. I won't get into all that here, but there's a ton of evidence for that. And if you go and do a deep dive on ancient Egypt and the Freemasons, you'll definitely see what I'm talking about. But you'll understand that that's their gig, and every time there's an inauguration of a president, they do what's called a raising of the Osiris ritual. And it's pretty creepy. It's pretty creepy. Also creepy, the fact that Horus is Isis's nephew son. That sounds like Mr. Miyagi, nephew son. Okay, so now this is pretty awesome right here. These 3 eclipses that cross America from the Revelation 12 fulfillment on August 21st of 2017 to this upcoming April 8th is 6 years, 6 months, and 16 days. If you don't know what the Revelation 12 fulfillments are, please go back and listen to New World Order Suppression of Truth, because I break that down. It's mind-blowing. Don't miss that. It is inarguable. There's just no math that can explain it away. Okay. Joel chapter 2 verse 31, the sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon into blood before the great, remember, this was in the last episode that I did, and I read this, and I want you guys to hear the word, before the great and the terrible day of the Lord to come. Why does it say the great and the terrible day? Well, for some of us, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome all the way around, but for some of us, it's going to be great. And then for others, not so much. So that's how you know there's 2 groups, people. 2 groups. Kind of like Purim. 2 groups. Acts chapter 2 verse 20. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord come. And so remember I spoke of typology earlier? Okay, so it turns out that Jonah is a type or a typos of Christ. And here's why. Matthew chapter 12, verse 38 through 41. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he said unto them, An evil An adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. This is Jesus speaking now. And there shall be no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonas. And behold, a greater than Jonas is here. So why would Jesus use this? Okay. Why would he use that? Because if I'm saying that the man is a type of Christ, like, I'd better know exactly the reason why. And I've had atheists say to me, how can a man live in a whale for 3 days and not die? Well, that's a very fair question. First of all, if we're taking the text seriously, it's a fish. It's not a whale. It's a fish because the text says it's a fish. Nonetheless, let's go. I once heard a guy say that science tells us what nature does when it is left to itself. And miracles happen precisely when nature is not left to itself. Think about that for a second. Makes total sense. There's divine intervention, when nature is moved out of the way, per se. So, that being said, the author who wrote the book of Jonah, he most likely understood that. Okay, and that's kind of a thing that I notice, is that we don't. I think we forget that people wrote this stuff, and like people like Paul, for instance. Paul was highly educated. He was highly intelligent. He wasn't some crazy wacko. Right? So I'm going to say the same thing about this author. I believe that this author likely understood that people don't usually get eaten by fish, a big fish, or a whale, and then survive. So he probably chalked it up to a miracle. I know I did. And it often helps to read the Bible from the perspective of having that human element, because I think we lose that. But that, that becomes really easy to lose when you're just, you're forgetting that the people that wrote it were human. And so we have to, like Mike Heiser said, we need to start thinking like ancient people that lived in that area. What were their customs and what would they do and how would they look at things, right? We do that with everybody else. Why can't we do that with the people that wrote the Bible? And so then when we read the Bible from the standpoint of a human who wrote it, it all of a sudden becomes clear. He knew that had to be a miracle. Because people didn't just get eaten by fish and then come back and just be like, what's up? What's for dinner? No. It also helps that I personally have seen miracles happen, not just in my own life. I've seen miracles happen simply because I had the faith that they would. I don't put limitations on God. And also, these miracles were not things that I would have necessarily chosen for myself or even wanted on my own timeline. Okay? But the bottom line is that because I never put God in a box, he was able to do all kinds of things. And he still does. And so, I think that that's important, that if we think to ourselves, no, that's not going to happen. What did we just do? Well, God's a gentleman. He's not going to force anything on you. I'll tell you what he will force. He will force you to your knees. And I know this doesn't sound logical. In fact, nothing that God does is logical from a human perspective. Unless you have the Holy Spirit, you'll never understand why things happen the way that they do. But he will force you to your knees because he loves you that much that he would rather you suffer here if he can have you there. Does that make sense? But as far as a miracle is concerned, he will not force himself on you. So if you're walking around going, yeah, that's not, God won't do that for me. Guess what? You're right. He won't. So, we need to start laying down our presuppositions of what we think we know and really take the Bible seriously when it says have faith that of a little child. Because otherwise we're going to miss it. The first mistake, in my opinion, is to believe that Jonah survived at all. So, check this out. Speaking of taking the Bible seriously. In Jonah chapter 2, verse 1 through 10, it says, Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly. So he's in there. And he said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell I cried. And thou heardest. For thou hast cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas. So now he's in the midst of the seas, and the floods encompassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. And then I said, I am cast out of thy sight. Yet I will look again toward thy holy temple. The waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The depth closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped around my head. Yeah, I'm just saying, at that point, that's when I just probably would have just all done. In verse 6, I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. Okay, how do you do that if you're in the belly of a fish and not dead? So he's in the bottom of the mountains, the earth with her bars. Notice how he says her. There's a reason for that. With her bars was about me forever. In his mind, forever. Yet thou brought me up my life from corruption. Remember that? Remember that. Put that in your mind. O Lord, my God, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came unto thee into thine holy temple. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy, but I will sacrifice unto thee with the voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. And the Lord spake unto the fish, and it vomited Jonah out onto dry land. Couple things here. The first thing is that he didn't say he was going to go preach to the Ninevites. He said he would be thankful. He said he would be thankful. And God obviously already knew, but he still spoke to the fish. We still have free will, you guys, which is crazy. Okay, so then how is this a type of Christ? Well, we can automatically see a few things. 3 days, right? 3 days, 3 nights. But it's definitely more than a dude in the belly of the fish for 3 days and then living to tell about it. Acts chapter 2, verse 25, and then verse 27. Paul is speaking here when he says, For David speaketh concerning him. And now here is where we see two things. First, we see once again the New Testament and the Old Testament concealed, and the Old Testament and the New Testament revealed. We are seeing it when Jesus speaks of the sign of Jonah, and then when Paul is speaking of the fact that David was giving a prophecy of Christ in Psalm 16. He goes on, he says, I foresaw the Lord always before my face, for he is on my right hand, that I should not be moved. Verse 27, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. So this is what he's saying. So this is David, right? We know David is speaking of Jesus. This is Psalm 16. We know he's speaking of Jesus. And the reason why we know this is because, number one, Paul confirmed it when he said that Jesus, or that David was speaking of him. Okay. But let's say Paul wasn't in the story. Let's say he wasn't in the story. Let's say we're just reading this verse with no confirmation whatsoever from Paul that it's about Jesus. How do we know it's about Christ? Neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. What he's saying is, he says, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou suffer thine Holy One to see corruption. He's saying, because you, and he's talking to God, he says, because you won't leave me in hell, which means he's dead in hell. He said, and you also won't suffer thine is your, okay, in Old English. You also won't suffer your Holy One to see corruption or death in the spiritual sense. So who is the Holy One? It's the Messiah. The Messiah is the Holy One. So we've got several confirmations there. Also, when he's talking about hell, it actually says Sheol. In the Hebrew, and I'm going to do an episode on this about hell because there's a lot of misconceptions about hell that need to be cleared up. But it actually says Sheol in the Hebrew, and in the Greek, it's Hades, or better known as Hades, who, by the way, is a small g. He's the small g Hades, who apparently was puked up by his pops, Kronos. I call him Mr. C. And then he and his three-headed dog were made to set up shop in the land of the dead. And if I didn't know any better, I'd say that his puppy may have found his beginnings in the Wuhan lab. Catch my drift. By the way, why do we say catch my drift? We need to stop saying catch my drift, because I just realized that when we say that, it sounds like we're asking someone to, like, you know, if they've smelled the crop dust that we just let go of. Oh, Lord, I'm slap happy. Okay, back to it. So remember Jonah chapter 2, verse 2, he says that he cried from the belly of hell, okay? Well, and then in the Hebrew it says Sheol. We know that he's talking about this because dude definitely dies. Okay, he dies. He sees himself in the depths of the earth with bars. Okay? So in my opinion, I don't really think that it can get any plainer, but just for good measure, though, he does. He makes it more plain, saying that his soul has fainted him, and how water has passed over him with the weeds all over his head. Honestly, that just makes me want to hurl right now. Wow, guys. Okay, so I just remembered something that, like, a couple episodes talking about if God had me go to New York, I'd rather be Jonah. Yeah, I'd still rather be Jonah. And my family knows what kind of a statement that is, because I'm not getting in any water that I cannot see my feet in. Okay, that is honest truth. I would rather die. I would rather die. And, like, I don't even like the smell of rain. Okay, so let alone the belly of a fish with only God knows what inside of it. Blech. Get that picture, right? Okay, so Sheol and Hades, right? They're the same. They are the same. And now let's connect this. So let's start with Jesus. Jesus, we know the story. He preaches to a land of people who not only belong in a maximum security prison, but we've also got some white collar criminals too. And A small few turn from their ways. And then Jesus is sacrificed and in Sheol for 3 days. He takes the keys from Hades. Okay. Oh, death, where is your sting, right? He's resurrected from the dead. He messaged his message is preached and many more turn away from evil. However, many will turn back. The great falling away, right? And they have already. It's called the deconstruction. That's a whole nother episode that I'm working on currently right now. But ultimately, there's going to be a judgment. Jesus said it. He said it. How do we know? Because we can prove the Bible. So at that point, we're going to cue Jonah. The story is that he gets on a boat to escape having to go to Nineveh. Which is significant right there. So hang on to that. There's a great storm, and the guys on the boat are all like, dude, what did you do? Okay. And he's like, dude, I didn't listen to God. And they're like, well, that was dumb. Just call him and say you're sorry. And then you'll listen. And Jonah's all, bro, just kill me now. And they were like, the drama, So they keep trying to row through the storm, but to no avail, because God has a taxi waiting for Jonah. See? So they go forward and they chuck him off board because drama, and cue the fish. They sacrifice him, guys. They sacrifice him, just like they sacrificed Jesus. Side note, besides the obvious choice for a taxi here, because they're in the middle of the ocean and whatnot, or the sea, I should say, I find it very interesting that God chooses a fish. Why? Because the Ninevites worshipped a small g by the name of Dagon. Half man, half fish. Anyway, he dies and is in Sheol for 3 days and 3 nights, right? We know that because Jesus confirmed that. He is resurrected. But what he doesn't know is that a small few on a boat in the sea are praising his God. And as he reluctantly goes to preach to the Ninevites. And these people are known through the land to belong in a maximum security prison. No white collar. They just be offing people. There's stories in archaeological evidence, Lord, that they skinned people alive. They were horrible. But as a result of his preaching, they did end up turning away from evil and back to God. But 100 years later, they go back to their wickedness. Ultimately, there's a judgment there too. And we know this because Jesus said it. Matthew quotes Isaiah here in Matthew chapter 12, verse 20 and 21. He says, a bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory. And in his name shall the Gentiles trust. I would say that happened. Do you guys agree? I think that happened. I think that there's more Gentiles that trust Jesus than there are Jews. And then verse 38, then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. Remember this? And what did he say? He said, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, but I ain't giving it to you. He said, the only sign y'all are going to get is of the prophet Jonas. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that it was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly. Actually, he says a whale. He says whale. I'm going to have to double check something real quick. Pause. Y'all, get this. So you guys, this is like firsthand experience here of like light bulb moments. So if anybody ever says to you that the fish was a whale, this is what Strong's says, okay? So the the word whale is only in the Bible once, and it's a sea monster. It's a sea monster, a whale, a huge fish. It says as gaping for prey. So that's a little odd, right? Because I at first was thinking about maybe it's a whale shark, right? Because they're huge, and they don't have teeth. But it says it's gaping for prey. A huge fish as gaping for prey. And the root word is chasma. And it means it's like a primitive form of yawn or gape. It says a gaping opening, a chasm, a gulf, or a yawn. So very interesting. So basically Jesus said a whale. I'm going to think it's a whale. Anyways, before that big old squirrel. So, yeah, he goes on to say it was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly. So shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. In 41, he goes on to say that Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. And that it's because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. I imagine that if Jesus had a microphone when he said that, he would have like dropped it and like flipped his hair all like, yeah, that's what I thought. Anyways, but there's one more thing here, and it's like God ties a big red bow around that typology that we just revealed here. This blew my mind. This was one of those things, kind of like how the whale thing just jumped out at me. This is kind of one of those things. So Jonah's up on the hill having a hissy fit that he has to go into Nineveh. And it was really hot outside. So God, being a merciful God, brings up a castor tree to give him some shade. But the next day, God was all, let's do this. It's time. Wake up and at him. And so Jonah chapter 4, verse 7 says, but God prepared a worm when the morning rose the next day, and it smote the gourd that it withered. So it destroyed the tree, started eating it. So I realized that Jesus also calls himself a worm. I was reminded of that. He calls himself a worm in Psalm 22. And so I went into the tools of Jonah, chapter 4, verse 7, to check and see if it was the same type of worm, to check and see if it was a tola worm. And sure enough, it was. But I noticed something else. I noticed the word morning. Morning should be boker. And it wasn't. It was shaker. And so naturally, as one does after they've been trying to put out an episode for an entire whole week, I follow the rabbit hole. And it's in the Bible one time. Shaker, one time. And it is in Psalm 22, verse 1. The words are written by David 1,000 years before Christ, yet they are the very words that Christ says while hanging on the cross. In verse 4, it says that our fathers trusted God to deliver them, and he did. And then in verse 6, he calls himself the Tola worm, the worm that attaches itself to a tree. He says, I am but a worm. And this worm attaches itself to a tree and allows its young to feed on its flesh, upon which it dies. And then at that point, it curls up like a heart, leaving a red stain. That stain will stay for 3 days. It turns white as snow, and it flakes off as if it were never there. And what does it say in Isaiah? It says that he will turn our sins, though our sins are red as scarlet, he will turn them white as snow. What's interesting here are the details. It's always in the details. And that castor tree is highly fatal to humans and animals and insects, except that worm. And it's very interesting because sin is poison, right? Sin is poisonous too. And it has tainted everything except Jesus, the worm. Do you get it? This is also that worm that God prepared to take away that poison. You get it? The verse in Jonah says, God prepared a worm. Yes, he sure did. He literally took that thing full circle. So David, he speaks of Jesus. Jesus speaks of Jonah. And then God, dealing with Jonah, brings it back to Jesus through David. Just awesome. Just awesome. But it doesn't stop there. Okay, we're almost done. We still have to figure out what this all has to do with each other. Okay? How does Jesus and Jonah come into play with these signs that are in the sky? Let's remember that Psalm 19 says that the heavens declare his glory, right? The Mazzaroth. And by the way, you guys, this is not astrology. I just want you guys to know that. There's a misconception out there that says that you're not supposed to look at the stars. You're not supposed to look at the stars for answers in your life. God created the heavens so that we would know, it says it in Genesis, that we would know the times and the seasons, the moyadim, the appointed times. It's just man, in all of man's quote-unquote glory, messed it all up. But also, okay, so the Mazzaroth created for the moyadim, it's also a map of the constellations. 88 in particular. I bet we're probably maybe missing some, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm just thinking maybe there's like a couple more dogs up there or something. Oh my gosh, I'm tired. But look, the bottom line is that the heavens declare his glory and that there is no language and no speech that cannot be heard by it, right? If you look up, it doesn't matter what nationality you are, what language you speak, you can't ignore it. It's there, and it's going to speak to you. It will tell you the same thing that it's telling me. The heavens declare his glory. He was not lying. Another note on declaration. Remember in Luke chapter 19, verse 40, when Jesus is being praised by his following, and then the Pharisees tell him to rebuke them, like the nerve, just saying, he responds by saying that even if they were silent, the rocks would cry out. How? How is that possible? Frequency. Frequency, people. Everything has a frequency. But that's for another episode, y'all. Okay, so back to the signs in heavens. Let's look at how this whole thing works together, shall we? So we went over the 3 eclipses. I laid out some of the symbolism there, the Aleph and the Tav, the convergence over Little Egypt, and the amount of time in between, symbolizing the 666. There's a lot more of that, by the way. That's going to come on the next episode. But there was another eclipse. It was on June 15th in the year 763 BC. This was the same time that Jonah would have been preaching to the Ninevites. And when he got to Nineveh, it was the Assyrian eclipse, and in part, it would explain why there was such a success in the conversion of the Ninevites. These guys were hit really hard with plagues and wars, ending in defeat. The Assyrians regarded plagues and eclipses and stuff like that as divine signs for judgment across the whole land. The plague of 765 followed a revolt, an eclipse in 763. And then revolts in the following 4 years would only confirm in the mind of the Assyrians that they were, in fact, under heavy judgment. And then, we need to also remember that 185,000 Assyrians were taken out by one dude, one angel. By the way, I think that was Jesus. Anyway, I think it's safe to say that at this point, these people have probably had enough. They done. But check this out. That eclipse came on June 15th of 763. And here's the deal. I have not actually found a solid resource listing this next part as true. But for whatever reason, there's a lot of narrative going around on this. Some people like to say that this particular eclipse actually happened on the 1st of Elul on the Hebrew calendar, but that would make it the Day of Atonement. And I couldn't find anything to back that up. In fact, the calendar is actually pretty messed up. There's a solid chance that the Jews have been celebrating their feasts on the wrong day for a long time. I think I read something like there could be as much as 2 years discrepancy. But nonetheless, here's what I do know. There is some weight to this theory of it being around that day, but not that they, the way that we've heard a lot of people speaking of it, and that includes some pretty well-known pastors out there too, by the way. I'll preface by saying that my dates could be off as well. But if so, it's by a lot. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. The narrative is that Jonah arrived in Nineveh on June 15th of 763 BC, and that this was the day that the eclipse took place. The Bible says that he walked for 3 days. Jonah, chapter 3, verse 4 says, "And Jonah began to enter the city a day's journey, and he cried and said, 'Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown.'" So why does he give Nineveh 40 days? Well, the Day of Atonement would have been September 21st of that year. It would have also been impossible for him to arrive on June 15th and then 40 days later, the Day of Atonement, right? If the Day of Atonement is September 21st, that's well more than 40 days. Make sense? Nevertheless, here's my thought. I think Jonah came into town earlier than that June 15th date, or he showed up right after. Nevertheless, he probably just said, "Look, y'all, I've done given you the stipulations, and there ain't no more thinking. No more thinking about it. Y'all got 40 days to get it together, and my daddy's going to whoop you." Oh. I'm sorry. I definitely don't think that that's what he said. Maybe something close. But actually, every year the Jews read that book of Jonah for the Day of Atonement because peeps not only got their act together, okay, but they did it the exact same way that the Jews would have done it in that time period for the Day of Atonement as well. So that's a decent clue. The king had issued a decree during the month of Elul that all of the people and their animals would wear sackcloth and ashes and fast for 40 days. They all did, and God decided then to have mercy, which brings me to another important detail. That is the mercy gate. But before I bring this whole thing full circle, I need you to stick with me just a smidge longer so I can tell you, if you don't already know, about the cities that are involved in these signs in the heavens. If you've heard my episode on the heptadic structure of the Bible, then this will make sense to you. If you have not heard that yet, I highly recommend going back to listen to it. It is the suppression of truth, I believe. And it has to do with the sevens in the Bible. And this is interesting because these cities are not the United States of America is not in the Bible. Okay? Where we are looking at a heptadic structure. So these eclipses have a heptadic structure to them. In 2017, we had the Great American Eclipse. That was the first time since 1776 that an eclipse had only touched America. Only America. Do you remember that I noted that out of the 45 from now until 2040, only 2 touch America alone? Okay, well, this one goes back on August 4th of 2017. It was called the Great American Eclipse because it was the only eclipse since 1776 to touch only America. Remember, solar eclipses are for the nations. Obviously, we know what happened in that year. Our nation was born, right? So that eclipse in 2017 enters through Oregon. So I'm looking at the flag of Oregon, and I'm looking, and I'm one of those people that sees symbolism in everything. Like, you can't watch TV with me or anything because I'll just ruin it. But so here's what I see. There's a sun on it, which is interesting because we're talking about an eclipse. There's an eagle holding a laurel branch with 13 leaves and then 3 arrows. It's also the 33rd state, if you remember me saying, admitted to the Union. So it's got 33 stars. There are 2 oxen on it. Jesus says his yoke is easy, his burden is light. And there's a plowshare with a bundle of wheat. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, and it shall come to pass in the last days. Okay? He specifically notes it, in the last days, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. And he shall judge, this is verse 4, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. And then I looked and I saw the word union. That's pretty self-explanatory. Unity, right? They shall not learn war anymore. Union. There's a story being told here. There's a story. Then it goes and it passes through Illinois. This is very important because it's where the eclipse next converges and then makes that big old X marks the spot on our great nation, America. This flag also has an eagle. It's holding a shield with 6 white stars. 6 white stripes. And then there's 7 red and then 13 stars. The dates on the seal are 1818 and 1868. This represents the year Illinois became a state and the year in which the Great Seal was redesigned by Sharon Tyndale, which also happens to be 50 years, which is the same amount of time as a jubilee. Go look up what a jubilee means, and that'll all come to life for you. A weird thing here, though, is that although it says the words state sovereignty and national... it's escaping me. I'm really sorry. But although state sovereignty comes first in the motto, state is at the bottom and sovereignty is upside down, which is strange. And then it leaves by way of South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina. And I know this flag well. It's pretty simple. It's blue with a palmetto tree and a crescent on it. And some would even say that it looks like a partial eclipse. But the crescent is a little weird because it's associated with historic symbols such as Artemis, Diana, Isis, Osiris. You get the point. Ishtar. And there's the Babylonian moon god who goes by the name of Sin. Okay, so here's the thing. The totality on this eclipse is only about 130 miles wide. So keep that in mind, okay, when I give you this next little tidbit. So it starts in Salem, Oregon, and in total passes over 7 more cities named Salem. Sorry, it's 7 total cities named Salem. Salem is another word for peace. It's first mentioned in the Bible in Genesis chapter 14, verse 18. And Melchizedek happens to be the king of Salem. He has brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. Here's why that's important. Melchizedek is the only king in the Bible who is also a priest until Jesus comes along. Then he is also a king and a priest. And guess what? So are we. That's another episode. Salem means peace, but it's also the name for Jerusalem. Melchizedek goes ahead and he changes the name to Jerusalem, which also means peace. And according to Psalm 76, verse 2, God's tabernacle is there. So it's passed over 7 cities by that name. I'm paying attention. Next. It exits at the end of the 7 in Fort Sumter. That is where the Civil War began. It started in Oregon, the place with unity. It's ending through the crescent where Civil War began. And that was just about 7 years ago. Now, this eclipse coming up, guys, this one passes over another 7 cities. But this is where, let's see where it starts. Okay, so it starts at a place called Eagles Pass. This is where the border crisis is. And what does Jesus say about eagles? He says, Matthew chapter 24, this is the Olivet Discourse, so we know it's last days. Chapter 24, verse 27 through 28 says, For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. But it doesn't really end there. There's a little more to it. In Eagles Pass, there's a park. It's been full of a lot of controversy lately because of the people crossing over there. It's called Shelby Park. The reason it's called Shelby Park is because the last Confederate soldier buried the last Confederate flag of the Civil War. He buried it there at Shelby Park. So literally, there are literal dots being connected that we are able to connect here. We could finish a picture, which that would be, I think I'm going to do that. So this upcoming eclipse comes through Eagles Pass. It leaves out through Nineveh, New York. but not before crossing over 6 others. So we have 7 Ninevehs. And what does that bring me to, right? Okay. I'm right back here at my guy Jonah. So when we put all of this together and then think of where we left in Nineveh, I have no other choice than to think about the type with Jesus, right? Why he came. Why did Jesus come? You know, we can look at Jonah and say, why did Jonah go there? Well, to preach to the Ninevites and get them to turn toward God, right? He's a type. He's a type of Christ. Why did Christ come? Same reason. Then I think about the atonement, because that's Jonah's gig for Nineveh, the atonement. But then I go back a little bit and I remember something. The mercy gate. The mercy gate. See, on the Day of Atonement, after a sacrifice, the priest would take the sins of all the people and put them on a scapegoat. Then he would take a red cord, tie it around the goat's horns, and lead it out of that mercy gate and into the wilderness to die. This happened once a year, and it would happen every year. And that gate was also called the Shushan gate. Do you remember when I said hang on to that word, Shushan? It's Purim, a day that's set aside to the Jews will ecstatically celebrate their escape from a genocidal maniac. And it has 3 things in common with Yom Kippur, which is also, it's the Day of Atonement. They are both about casting lots. They both hinge on entering the presence of a king. And they are forever holidays. There are only 2 holidays in which God says, celebrate this forever. But in particular, there are 2 separate days when it is celebrated. And it just depends on whether or not there are walls in your city or not. But my point is that some are celebrating and some are not. And so we have 3 lunar eclipses, all on Purim, except only one is on Shushan. Only one refers to the Shushan gate, and it's on March 25th of this month. Remember, that gate is connected to the Gate of Atonement. There's one more thing, friends. There's one more thing about that gate. It's also the Eastern Gate. It's the gate that my guy Jesus is going to strut through like a boss right after he splits the ground on the Mount of Olives. Ezekiel chapter 44, verses 1 and 2. Then he brought me back the way of the gate of the outward sanctuary which looketh toward the east, and it was shut. Then said the Lord unto me, this gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it. Therefore, it shall be shut. Y'all, they didn't shut that gate until 1541, when the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman decided he was not having that. So there's no way that Ezekiel would have just thought that whole thing up. He's coming, you guys. He's coming. That's a promise. That's a promise. That's not just from me. That's from him. I don't ever like to be the doom and gloom in a situation. But you guys, things are not going to get better until he comes. People keep saying peace, peace, peace. Yes, keep saying that. Because it will happen, just not before he comes. I can promise you that the Bible is true. And what it says is that we don't want to be stuck here without him. It's going to get really ugly, and he's giving us all of the signs. Like, the game is already won. That being said, I have another part coming on the Antichrist. It's not over. This is not over, guys. There's a lot to go over here. We all need to know what to look for. Thank you guys so much for your time and your patience with me. If you're not a believer in Christ yet and you still have questions or you need proof, please reach out to me. I am happy to give that to you, and I'll never judge you because I'm a hot mess, and I will never force anything down your throat because I ain't got time. I'm just going to give it to you the way I know it. But in the meantime, just know that you're not here by accident. If you're hearing this, you're not here by accident. If you're breathing, it's not by accident. I know you're probably doing it on purpose, but I'm just saying, you were born for a purpose. And if you're searching for answers, and if that knock at your door is getting louder, don't wait. Go open it, please. Pizza Hut has a good special going on. Buy one, get one free. You can get text messages on that, by the way, but Jesus already got it. He picked up the tab. He's got food. He's got food. All right, guys. That's it. Until next time, this is Brianna signing off saying, God bless.